Once upon a time, at the very edge of the map where the ink-blue ocean met the starry sky, stood the Starfall Lighthouse. It was not the tallest tower in the world, nor the grandest, but it was undoubtedly the most important. Painted in cheerful stripes of mustard yellow and crisp white, it sat upon a rugged cliff, guarding the entrance to a magnificent, hidden harbour. Inside this cosy, wind-battered tower lived Mr. Henderson, an elderly lighthouse keeper with a beard as fluffy as a summer cloud. But Mr. Henderson was not alone. Living secretly amongst the polished brass cogs and wooden floorboards was Elian. Elian was a Star-Sprite. He was no taller than a teacup, dressed in a tiny coat woven from bluebell petals, and he possessed a magical gift. His heart glowed with a soft, warm, golden light. Elian was accompanied everywhere by his two best friends. A clumsy but courageous puffin named Sven, who wore a perpetually confused expression, and a wise, ancient sea turtle named Nia, who lived in the rock pools below. Elian had a pure and noble passion. He simply loved to help. Whilst Mr. Henderson slept during the day, Elian would flutter about the lighthouse. He would use a tiny feather to dust the enormous crystal prisms of the lantern room, find Mr. Henderson's constantly misplaced spectacles, and polish the brass dials until they gleamed like gold. Elian believed with all his tiny heart that helping others, no matter how small the deed, was the most powerful magic in the world. One midwinter evening, the sky did not simply turn dark, it turned an angry, bruised purple. The wind began to howl a fearsome, lonely song, and the waves crashed against the cliffs like galloping grey horses. It was the arrival of the Shadow Squall, a legendary storm that brought thick, blinding fog and treacherous tides. Mr. Henderson bravely climbed the spiraling iron staircase to light the great oil lamp. But as he reached the top, a sudden, violent gust of wind shattered the lantern room window. The heavy iron trapdoor slammed shut behind him, the lock jamming completely, and the wind blew out the grand lamp. The gears groaned, the clockwork stopped, and the Starfall Lighthouse plunged into total darkness. "Oh, heavens!" Mr. Henderson cried out, tugging at the jammed door. "The light is out! The ships will be lost on the Dragon's Teeth rocks." Down below, hidden in a crack in the wall, Elian heard the keeper's despair. He peeked out into the howling storm. Through the thick, grey fog, Elian's sharp, magical ears picked up three distinct sounds. First, the deep, booming horn of a grand merchant ship captained by Captain Hiroshi from Japan, carrying fragile porcelain. Second, the ringing bell of a magnificent galleon steered by Captain Elena of Spain. And finally, the faint, desperate cry of a small, wooden fishing boat belonging to a young local girl named Anya. They were all sailing blindly towards the jagged rocks. "We must help them, Sven!" Elian shouted over the roaring wind. Sven gave a resolute squawk, puffed out his chest, and offered his back. Elian climbed aboard, and the little puffin fought his way up the spiraling stairs, battling the freezing draughts until they reached the lantern room. Elian hopped onto the massive, dark lamp mechanism. He tried with all his might to push the heavy brass wheel to restart the clockwork, but it was utterly useless. He was simply too small. Outside, the booming horn of Captain Hiroshi's ship grew dangerously loud. They were mere moments away from disaster. Elian looked at his tiny, glowing hands. Then, he looked at the giant, magnificent crystal prisms surrounding the broken lamp. An idea sparked in his mind, a dangerous, exhausting idea, but the only one that could save the sailors. "Sven, help me up!" Elian commanded. Fluttering to the very center of the grand glass lens, Elian stood exactly where the oil flame should have been. He closed his eyes, placed his tiny hands over his heart, and thought of Captain Hiroshi, Captain Elena, and young Anya. He thought of how much they needed to get home safely. He thought of the pure joy of helping others. Elian took a deep breath and pushed all his love, courage, and desire to help outwards. Suddenly, Elian's soft golden glow erupted into a blinding, brilliant starburst. The magnificent crystal prisms caught his magical light, multiplying it 1,000 times over. A colossal beam of pure, shimmering, diamond-white light sliced through the darkness, piercing the great squall like a glorious sword. "Look!" cried Captain Hiroshi on his deck, shielding his eyes from the miraculous beam. "The lighthouse! Hard to starboard!" The massive ship groaned, narrowly missing the terrifying black rocks, guided by Elian's light into the safe channel. Elian was trembling. Shining this brightly was draining all his magical energy. He felt incredibly tired, his little knees shaking. But the job was not done. He shifted his weight, turning his tiny body. The ground beam swept across the raging sea. It caught the sails of Captain Elena's galleon just in time, guiding her away from a treacherous whirlpool and towards the calm waters of the bay. But where was Anya? Elian's light was beginning to flicker. The golden hue was turning pale. "I cannot stop now," Elian whispered to himself, a tiny tear of exhaustion rolling down his cheek. "She needs me." Sven wrapped his warm wings around Elian's legs to keep him steady. Down below in the freezing water, old near the turtle poked her head through the waves and let out a loud, encouraging bellow that echoed up to the tower. Drawing on the very last drop of his magic, Elian let out a magnificent shout. His light flared with the colors of the sunrise, pinks, golds, and vibrant blues. The beam swept over the roaring waves and finally found Anya's tiny fishing boat, tossing helplessly in the surf. The beautiful, warm light painted a glowing path directly to the harbor entrance. Anya steered her little boat along the golden road, tears of relief in her eyes, until she glided safely to the docks. Having seen all 3 ships to safety, Elian's light finally gave out. He collapsed onto the cold brass floor, completely exhausted, as the first rays of morning sun began to chase away the storm clouds. The sea calmed, returning to its peaceful, ink-blue self. Hours later, Mr. Henderson finally managed to force the trapdoor open. He gasped at the shattered glass and the broken lamp, but then he saw something marvelous. There, in the center of the great crystal lens, lay Elian, sleeping soundly, with Sven keeping him warm. The tiny Star-Sprite was glowing faintly again, a peaceful, happy warmth radiating from his chest. Down in the harbour, the townspeople and the sailors from all over the world gathered. Captain Hiroshi, Captain Elena, and Anya climbed the cliff path, leaving baskets of fresh fruit, warm bread, and beautiful silks at the lighthouse door to thank the mysterious, miraculous light that had saved them. When Elian finally awoke, he was resting on a soft velvet cushion in Mr. Henderson's pocket. The old keeper smiled gently. "I always knew this lighthouse had a magical heart," Mr. Henderson whispered softly. Elian beamed, his golden light shining a little brighter. He had learned the greatest secret of all: no matter how tiny you are, a heart that beats to help others will always shine bright enough to guide the whole world home.